Good evening, and welcome to this week's edition of Chicago Newsroom 2.0. I'm your host, Andy Zopp. In tonight's roundtable segment, we'll take a closer look at the current state of the city of Chicago, from political headwinds to economic trends, the health of businesses, and the safety of those of us who call Chicago home. We'll unpack it all. But first, in this week's one-on-one segment, I'll be joined by former corporate executives Juatise Gathings and Matt Johanson, discussing the launch of their new venture, Just Act Partners. We'll get started on the other side of this short break. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Kimberly Loftus, and I am financially secure. I have made it my business to help you achieve the same financial transformation for 2024. Let me help you understand your personal balance sheet and money fears.
A lot of people don't realize that even if you pull your report yourself, it doesn't affect your score like you think.
In the Money airs on Thursdays at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV 19, cantv.org, and on the all-new CAN-TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
After a combined 40 years of service, my first two guests stepped away from their leadership roles with Discover Financial Services, joining forces to launch their own venture, one aimed at expanding equitable economic opportunity for all Chicagoans. I've had the pleasure of working with them both over the years. Welcome, Juatise and Matt. Nice to see you both.
Thank you for having us.
Well, thanks for coming, and we're really excited to hear about what you're doing on the show. I'm going to start with you. Recently, both wrote an op-ed that was in Crane, Chicago, I think. I'm going to just quote some of it for my audience. For over 3 years, we've had front row seats to one of Chicago's most notable corporate place-based investments. That project aimed to bring 1,000 jobs to the South Side, with the vast majority of employees residing in Chatham and surrounding communities like Roseland, Auburn Gresham, Inglewood, South Shore, and South Chicago. We came away from that experience convinced that the single most powerful way to pursue inclusive economic opportunity is to create more quality jobs in Chicago's South and West Side communities. We are so convinced that we are making it our life's work to accelerate and scale similar place-based investments. Wow, that's a very powerful statement. Your life's work. So what convinced you? What made you decide we're leaving this corporate world and we're going to go do this ourselves?
Yeah,
Juatise?
After serving together for a combined 40 years, I think the thing that was top of mind for us was this notion, like on the side of our desk, we met with over 200 companies and organizations trying to compel them to make investments on the South and West Side. And while everyone left excited, there wasn't a lot of movement. And as we started to explore, like, what's the gap between what people are actually willing to do versus what actually happens in our neighborhoods? And really it came down to a couple things. The first one was belief, is what do they have to believe to know that investing in Chicago's neighborhoods is good for business, but also good for community? And that second thing, which is where Matt and I come in, is really understanding this notion around the how-to, right? If you think about corporate America, there is not this muscle that teaches people how to appropriately engage in the full ecosystem of Chicago to leverage government and workforce and the faith leaders in the neighborhoods. And there's also been a lot of distrust. So you almost need somebody to help bridge the gap to make sure that not only investments come to the community, but they're executed with the right cultural competencies and they're also sustainable. And so we believe, based off of our front row seat over the last 3 years, our belief is that the work that we did in Chatham changed the inside culture of Discover. And we also believe that any company would benefit a great deal from being located in our neighborhoods.
Right. So I just want to level set with the audience, because I know what you're talking about, but it occurred to me as you were talking that because I had a front row seat to the incredible work that you did, that we should just talk a little bit about the project that you both worked on and made happen that was so powerful and is still so powerful in Chatham. So can you talk a little bit about it, Matt?
Yeah, so I guess it was in 2020, mid-year 2020, that our CEO at the time, Roger Hochschild, made a decision that we often credit them, not many tall, gray-haired white CEOs are making, to move 1,000 of our jobs onto the south side of Chicago. And so through that, we found an abandoned Target store, refurbished that site, and started by the end of 2022 then. We had hired 600 people on the way to 1,000. And like Juatise said, we found that it was not just a community investment, it was an investment in Discover. It turned out to be great business. That was the top operating operations center. It had low attrition, it had high engagement, and great scores, returns from our customers saying they were going to get great service out of that center.
Right. What's the gap for a corporate community? Because, as you know, I spend a fair amount of time in the corporate world. I talk a lot to CEOs, and everybody wants to do the right thing. They say they want to have impact, but then when it comes time to action, things happen. They get in the way. So, Matt, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, what he said, that muscle is not there. We've never tried to do this before, and it's counterintuitive that, this could actually be good business for us. And what we've learned is that place-based investment is going to take success at 3 different levels. First, this executive level, where there are strong decisions, perhaps not popular decisions, that are made and stuck with through thick and thin. All right, to say this is an investment that we're making and we're going to figure out how to make it work, right? Businesses are great at solving problems, and there needs to be that executive buy-in. Then at the kind of worker level, right, at that, the folks, the subject matter experts that all come together to do anything, those folks need to operate with cultural competency. They need to understand that nobody's asking them to lower standards. What we're asking to do is to work with equity, this notion that we're going to help each succeed with whatever they need to succeed. And then there has to be the third level, which is true community engagement, which is not, kind of going in with a savior complex, look, we're bringing jobs in or whatever the investment is. But one that says we want to be invited into a community, we want to become part of the fabric. Nobody knows both the opportunities and the problems that are in a community like community members, and they're already working on it. Yeah. Join forces with them. Use your platform and your assets in their endeavors to solve those problems and to build and focus on the strengths of the community. And if you have success, operational success at those 3 levels, you will find really good business and you'll find really good community impact.
Wow. So Juatise, talk a little bit about how is Just Act Partners putting all those pieces together to actually make things happen? And do you have some projects that you can talk about that are underway?
Yeah. So over the last, I would say, 3 months or so, Matt and I have decided just to go on a listening tour, right? Mm-hmm. Really understanding kind of what's happening in the network. I think you have bodies like the Civic Committee or the Corporate Coalition or entities that are really trying to get the corporate executives to move. But what we found out is it's really hard to coordinate against all of the individuals that's required to bring a place-based investment together, right? Mm-hmm. You got the companies, you got to get the government moving, you got to get the local city council members on board, you got to make sure the neighborhood groups and it fits into all the neighborhood plans. All of those things together require a great deal of coordination. And so Matt and I view our role after doing it with Discover over the past 3 years as having the skill set to help people better coordinate, right? And so Just Act Partners is setting out not just to start a new body of work, but help people execute with excellence. And I think it's in the name, Just Act. Act with justice, but also do something, right? So most of the large consulting firms will bring you, a 20-page deck and tell you all the challenges, but we want to actually help you execute on what some of those solutions are. And I think that, one of the projects that we're working on now that we're super excited about is this notion of having organizations invest together. So the Corporate Coalition is one of our partners, and they're taking their members to say, let's take an existing development project, whether that's, the 95th Street corridor of the Chicago State, or whether that's a project being ran by Leon Walker, and how do we amplify those projects by making sure corporate tenants are ready to line up and be located in neighborhoods? And then on the corporation side, how do we make sure they can draw a line and have a good business case so that when they make the decision, they know exactly what return they're going to get, and it's not just doing charity. And so coming from a corporate background, we are able to speak to the C-suite, but we are also able to go into the neighborhood and really make sure that we are listening and understanding what's the right design to make sure that individuals can not just be employed, but also be successful to have a thriving career with the organization.
Wow. I know that in the Discover Project, you worked really hard to ensure that the jobs were good jobs,
Yes.
right? That they were jobs that people not only would want, but could stay in and could build lives in. How important is that, and why do you think that's so important?
I think it's super important. I mean, I'm a kid from Roseland, so I grew up in the neighborhood, and in the middle of high school, my mom moved our family to Arizona just to have access to opportunity. She wanted to have a job where she didn't have to worry about us getting to and from school. Every parent should have that in their neighborhood. They should be able to go to church, go to work, go to school, and do whatever they need to do, and also be able to sustain and support a family. And we believe that through the work at Discover, we realize that it's not doing something new and additional for the community. It's doing what you're already going to do, but with an eye towards equity and inclusion. And so when we think about the jobs that will come into the neighborhood, we believe that corporations offer quality jobs. And just because it's on the south side or the west side doesn't mean it needs to come at a lower cost. It comes with the same level of excellence and the same level of performance. And coming from the south side, I personally know how much talent resides there, but matching the opportunity is really the key.
Right. Thank you for what you're doing. You know that your work is deep in my heart, and you know that I believe very much so that it does make a difference and will make a difference. So thank you. Keep it up. We can't wait to hear more about Just Act Partners.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We'll be right back after this message.
On the next edition of Change Agents, we will highlight an organization dedicated to creating the next generation of problem solvers, critical thinkers, and future leaders.
We really move with a mission of making smart and chess cool, with chess lessons on the board and life lessons off the board.
Join the conversation Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN-TV 19. Stream us live on cantv.org or on the CAN-TV app. Experience the power of community television.
Life is never picture perfect in a city as large and diverse as Chicago. But what's the current state of affairs for a city still in the throes of a quickly evolving migrant crisis and a downtown business district still struggling to reclaim its luster post-pandemic? And lest we forget the omnipresent concern that is ensuring the safety of residents and visitors alike. To help answer these questions and others, I'm joined by two fantastic journalists, the Emmy Award-winning CEO of Talk to Samantha Media, Samantha Thomas, along with Francia Garcia Hernandez, reporter for Austin Weekly News. Welcome back, ladies. So nice to see you both. So let's dig right in. Let's start at the top of the heap here in the city. So the new mayor got his budget passed, which is a huge, huge hurdle, but he's still struggling with the business community, and he's even getting a little bit of pushback and throwback from some of his own on the progressive side of the aisle. What do you think about how the new mayor's doing? What kind of grade would you give him, Francia? I'll start with you.
I think it's a complicated, evaluation to make. The mayor has been grappling with the migrant crisis, and that has been at the forefront of many, many Chicagoans. It's also an issue that has brought to light many inequalities and many issues that were there that were even more evident during the COVID-19 pandemic and that we haven't fully recovered from. So I think it's brought a lot of backlash back and forth, and a lot of topics like housing, like jobs, like how do we support communities in need? How do we make decisions with communities to the forefront? And that's causing some tensions within City Council, within his supporters. He's not as progressive as some would want him to be, but he's also more progressive than some would want him to be.
Right, exactly. Great point. Samantha, how about you? What grade are you handing out these days, or is it too early to grade in the semester?
It's not too early to grade in this semester, and I think with Mayor Brandon Johnson, I would give him a B. I would say a B plus. B for Brandon, but he could do better, if you will. Brandon Johnson, I believe, as Francia said, he is not as progressive as many of us would want him to be, but too progressive for some. I kind of think he brought a lot of his CPS background with him. Sure. You know how you have the cool teacher in school who, he would be the one to be the disciplinarian, but at the same time he was cool. You can't be cool on Chicago though. And I think that's what happens, is the disconnect maybe from the classroom to city politics. It's not translating very well. Right. And what happens is we can see that in a lot of decisions that aren't being made or that are passive responses to many people. You gotta be kind of tough. And I think that's what his opponent would have been a little bit more tough on. But I believe we got the better of the two. However, I do think Brandon, I give him a B plus.
Yeah?
Yeah, maybe a B plus.
Oh, wow. I think that's a B plus. I worked hard for a lot of my B pluses personally, so he should be happy. Yeah. But I think both of you pointed out something that I think is interesting. He's not progressive enough for some, too progressive for others, but that's going to be the truth no matter, I think, where he landed, right? Welcome to the diverse city of Chicago. You're never going to make everybody happy. And I think the key is knowing the path that you want. I think he's, like any new mayor, I think he's still figuring that out. And I think he's making some progress. But I also think, and Francia, you touched on this, he's facing a huge issue, right? That of not only is resource constraint, like the pandemic is a huge issue, and let's face it, Mayor Lightfoot did, I thought, some amazing work dealing with that, but she also got some very immediate resources, right, to support. And while Mayor Johnson's gotten some resources on the migrant crisis, some would argue that the federal government hasn't stepped up enough, and there's still problems. So, I think the migrant crisis, since we were talking about it, how do you think? Are you think we're well positioned for the DNC? And that's really, besides right now, the real immediate crisis of people coming here in sub-zero temperatures who are not prepared for it. As we think about it for a city in 2024, I think the second big issue is, are we going to be ready to present ourselves for the DNC? I don't know. I thought you were shaking your head. No.
You know how you can make things look good, and this is but if the inside is not right, it's going to seep out at the seams. People know what's going on. They see the news, people coming here for DNC. I think Chicago is a clean city. We smell good. It looks a lot better than New York. Our cousin is what I call New York. But I think that there's going to be a lot of things that will come to the surface. The migrant crisis is embarrassing. It is. And I do feel for the people who have come here, and I know they're leaning on the federal government, but what was the plan? What was the plan? We still haven't heard a concrete plan, and that's probably, now you're making me change my grade a little bit. So it might err towards a C, but DNC ready, we're gonna look good. We are gonna look good. Well, it's just inside.
I'm a little more optimistic. Francia, how about you? You think we'll have made more progress on the migrant situation by the summer and be in a better position to represent the city as the sanctuary and welcoming city that we say we are?
I sure hope so. I think in the beginning, and I was doing some reporting on the migrant crisis since the spring of last year, and we saw little city coordination, little city responses or resources. Most of the help at the police districts was coordinated by neighbors, by municipalities, by nonprofits. We didn't see a lot of city intervention. But I think with the partnership that was announced last year with the city and several church and faith leaders around the city to help migrants transition into housing and find wraparound services and get settled, we might see somewhat of a plan, or what's starting to look like a plan. I think in the midst of, and we have to talk about this, it's an international crisis. There are more than 7 million Venezuelans who have been displaced from their home country. So this is going to keep happening. It's an ongoing problem. We have to be ready. And I think if the city and the mayor starts to look at it as something that is going to continue, they need to start escalating some of these responses, like the faith leader alliances or nonprofit alliances, to make sure that this city is ready for the DNC.
Well, let's move on and talk a little bit about downtown Chicago and the retail environment. Is struggling. And when I talk to my the former colleagues in the business community, they're still colleagues, but people were when I was in the corporate world, I talked to CEOs, and people are worried about downtown. They're worried about, is it the how office space? What are you thinking, and what do you think the city is doing enough to reinvest in downtown? I'll start with you, Samantha, and then I'll move to you, Francia.
Well, being a Chicago native, you grew up, and it still is considered Magnificent Mile. These days it's more like meh, and I'm like, going downtown, it hurts. It hurts to see what State Street looks like, that great street, and all of the stores are now vacant. And we look at, Water Tower, a whole floor, many floors are being just empty and wanting to convert to office space. It hurts, and hopefully there can be an uptick. and some things. I do think that the dollar still goes a long way downtown. You still have some of your big stores. You know, the big Louis Vuitton is in the Burberry's and all those good ones. And still 900 North Michigan, they're still pretty much holding on too. But it's all around the country.
Right.
And it pretty much hit Chicago a lot because that is one of our main tourist attractions. So hopefully there will be an uptick, an upturn. It's just disheartening to see.
Yeah. It's been definitely disheartening, I think, for many of the business owners who operate down there. Francia, how about you? What do you think how the city's response to downtown and how they're thinking about downtown?
I think, as Samantha said, it is a part of the city that is iconic, and I think it draws tourism. So whenever we have tourists in town, they will be looking at this area. So I think the city needs to be investing in that, in public safety. When there are unfortunate incidents, and there have been some, I wouldn't say it's been dramatic, but it can be perceived as dramatic when you, as a tourist who doesn't know the city, read about crime in the downtown area. So that's something that really needs to be prioritized. And I think the business community also wants to see that prioritized because they want to make sure that their stores are safe, that their employees are safe, and that they're going to have the clientele that they expect. So that's something that I think needs to be addressed.
Right. The one thing you talked on and touched on is a big issue for Mayor Johnson and for those of us who live in this city and work in the city, and that is crime and keeping the city safe. So homicides are down 13%, but there are from pre-COVID, but there's still a lot of crime, a lot of armed robberies. How do you think the new superintendent is doing, and how do you think the plans are going for helping us feel safer? I'll start with you, Francia. You were out in the neighborhoods all the time.
Yes, and I think something that's really important to remember is that nationally, murders have gone down, but we still haven't gone back to pre-pandemic levels, and these increased during the pandemic. But there's also some good news sometimes in terms of districts and specific districts. So on the west side, last year I did a story, and we could see a dramatic decrease in violent crime in these districts, and it's some of the most violent districts in the city, but they were seeing some reductions, and I think it was the work of local leaders, local police leaders working with organizations, with neighbors, with faith leaders to try to make the neighborhood safer, to try to improve and bring resources, to try to reduce recidivism. So there were many strategies to make this happen, right? So I think when we look at a city as big, as diverse as Chicago, we need to be looking at all of these different actions that will actually help reduce or improve public safety and reduce crime. I think some of the initiatives that were included in the new public safety program unveiled last year are leaning more toward that, investing, partnerships, community policing, and I think that could bring results, but it's not overnight. It takes time.
Yeah.
Right. How do you think the superintendent's doing? I think, he's helping to improve morale, which I also think is making a positive difference. I don't know, Samantha, are you hearing that or seeing that?
I am, Andy, and I do believe he's doing what he can do. When you're put in a new position, and as Francia said, things take time. And I know many of us want overnight. It's not going to stop. I have an app, and dare I say the name, but it's the Citizen app. It goes off a lot. And I live on the south side. I'm in the Bronzeville community, and you hear it go off all the time. And I just know that a lot of that is the crime and the uptick, lack of resources. And people, they turn into, well, I need to get because I don't have type of things. You really don't see, we know crime is different on different sides of the town, of Chicago rather. But I do think that we just need more resources in different communities. And once we see a lot of things invested in communities, and that's one of the big things I did love the Invest Southwest. I was a big proponent for that when it was brought about by Mayor Lightfoot. But I do think the superintendent, yes, I do think he's doing a good job in the door. He's doing what he can.
Right.
Everything is going to take time. Chicago is not a town.
No.
It's a humongous city, and it'll just take time to do things. And again, I like what you said about recidivism and everything. Just different things, once different programs take place. Crime is never going to stop. It's one of those things, but I think that our officials are doing what they can to make it a little better.
So speaking of community, one other big topic is education. So, we're on the verge of an elected school board coming in next year. A lot of challenges with just running CPS. I don't know, what do you think? What are you seeing in terms of good news and challenges facing CPS this year, in the coming year, Samantha?
As we elect new officials, just what changes are really going to be done for our students? We got a lot of charter schools, bustling with charter schools, and then they kind of compete with the CPSs. I do think CPS could do a lot better, especially being a product of them, because I won't say they fail us, but we can just do better, especially with the high school level.
Okay. Francia?
I think it's going to be challenging. CPS also got a lot of funding during the COVID era that funded a lot of programs, and after school programs brought more social workers to schools, bilingual resources. There was a lot that could be done because that money was there, but we always knew that money was just temporary.
Right.
So I think leadership in CPS needs to start thinking ahead of if these programs had impact and measuring those programs, and then trying to recover what was good about it and find ways to fund that. Right. Especially in neighborhood schools that have not received funding historically, and just making sure that kids are receiving the appropriate level of education citywide, and we don't see these gaps between one high school and the other. Absolutely. Or one elementary school and the other, because that's literally what's going to make a difference for the future of Chicago.
Right. Awesome point, and we are shockingly out of time, but I think what we've learned is what I knew when I was in the mayor's office. It is a very hard job. There's a lot of challenges facing the city, but we also have so much to be optimistic and hopeful about, and particularly in the strength of our young people, our teachers, our police, who really come every day trying to step up. So I too am optimistic about everything, and I'm particularly grateful for both of you, for all your thinking and caring about what happens here, because that's what matters the most. So thank you so much for joining me here today, and we will be right back with my final thoughts.
Hi, I'm Bianca Cotton. On a new episode of Behind a Confident Smile, I'll be sitting in conversation with Yvonne Orr.
I am being 100% truthful. People searching to find themselves, they don't know how to stand in their truth.
Join the conversation Monday, January 29th at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV 19 and streaming on cantv.org and CAN-TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
Chicago is in many ways like that one family member who you continue to love and root for, even as they continue to struggle to find their way. And like that special relative, you recommit to doing your part to support and cheer them on to better days, hoping that one of those days they'll finally stick the landing, and cheering them on when they do. Each mistake made is an opportunity for a lesson learned. But it's imperative that the lessons actually get learned to ensure that the same mistakes aren't repeated time and time and time again. As we continue to investigate the city's health and discuss ways to improve upon it, let me encourage each of us to set our own perspectives aside right next to ego and pride of ownership, and open ourselves to new ideas and approaches, and also to actively engage in making a difference in and for our city. Chicago is the city of big shoulders, but those shoulders must be willing to step up to the assignment and pitch in. Hearing, learning, and seeking to understand the issues are the first steps we can all take. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, be well and well informed. Good night.